All right, hello everybody. Tonight I'm out here at Rocky Mountain National Park doing some night photography, and I thought I'd talk a little bit about some questions that I've been getting from some people who have been inquiring about my night photography workshops up here in Rocky Mountain National Park. Now, one of the first questions I'm often getting is, what kind of special equipment do I need to do night photography? And the answer to that is a little complicated. A lot of people are asking the question, well, I have this really basic entry-level camera. Can it do night photography, or do I need to have something else? And the answer to that question is pretty straightforward. Just about any interchangeable lens camera made within, let's say, the last 5 years, whether it's entry level or it's super expensive or all that, can probably do the job. Now, the caveat to that is, the more entry level and basic your camera is, the more the lens that you're using really starts to matter and really affect the quality of the shots that you're going to get. That kit lens that came with your camera, that's probably not going to cut it. If you try to do it with your kit lens, yes, you can, but you're probably not going to be super happy with the results. And some of you out there might be thinking, yeah, okay, but I really got myself a really nice wide-angle lens that I paid a lot of money for. I've got this great, 16 to 35 f4 that I bought, or 12 to 24 f4 that I bought for my crop sensor camera, or something like that. And, well, those are probably great lenses for a lot of things, and they may be really high quality, but they're still not going to do the job for night photography very well. And here's why. A big part of night photography, especially if you're using a crop sensor or a more entry-level camera, is gathering enough light to really start to cut down on your noise and be able to capture a higher quality image. And to do that, you need a fast lens. What is a fast lens, you might be asking? Is it a lens that focuses really fast? Well, no, that's not what that means. Because after all, doing night photography, your autofocus isn't going to do a thing for you, because it's going to be too dark for the system to work. So you're going to be doing manual focusing anyway. What having a fast lens means is that you have a maximum aperture on your lens of f2.8 or more. And by or more, I mean a smaller number, which means a larger aperture. And if you don't quite follow that, I can address that in some different videos. But what that does is allows your lens to bring in a lot more light to your sensor and to capture an image with more light, less noise, and higher quality for a night image. And some of you are saying, well, I have a really nice full frame camera, it's super expensive, do I still really need a fast lens? And the answer to that, unless you're using a star tracker, is yes, you still need a fast lens to capture a high quality night image. So if you're joining me on a night photography workshop, I'm going to recommend that you have a good fast lens that is probably 35 millimeters or wider, that can at least get to f2.8. All right, I'm just going to pause here for a minute, because some of you may have already done some research into some good quality lenses for night photography. And outside of some of the fully manual Rokinon lenses and stuff like that, you probably found that they are not inexpensive. You can easily run $400, $500 or more to get one of these lenses that performs well for the job. But if you're just trying this out, especially if you're coming on one of my night photography workshops and you've never done this before, I would probably highly recommend that you rent one of these lenses, which will be a lot less expensive. There's some places online that you can do that from, lensrentals.com or borrowlenses.com. If you're coming on one of my workshops to Rocky Mountain National Park, there's also a local location here in Boulder called Pro Photo Rentals that you can rent from as well. And it gives you the option, of course, to save on shipping. You can just pick it up here in Boulder for the weekend, drop it off on your way home, or if you live locally here, just drop it off. And that can often save you a little bit of money over the online places. So renting is definitely a good option, especially if you've never tried it before and you're not ready to make that investment for a $400 or $500 or more lens to do it, because some of them, especially the manual only lenses, may not be that useful for anything else. So what lenses do I use for my night photography? Well, the lens I have on here tonight, and I'm using more and more often, is a Tamron 35mm f1.8 lens. And that is quickly becoming my favorite lens for night photography, because it lets in a lot of light. It is a very high quality lens, and the perspective of the 35mm is one I'm really coming to appreciate. All right, another lens that I use a lot, and has been the lens that I've had for 4 years now, and I've taken a lot of my night photography with over the years, is this lens right here. This is a 16 to 28mm f2.8 lens, and it has definitely served me well over the last 4 years. f2.8 still gives me a lot of light, and that zoom range with the constant f2.8 all the way through is very nice to be able to use as well. Now, I'm using that on a full frame camera. If you are using a crop sensor camera, the first lens that I recommend to almost everybody is a Tokina 11 to 20mm f2.8 zoom. It's a great lens. It's an autofocus lens, so you can use it in other situations as well, but it also serves itself very well to astrophotography on a crop sensor camera. So those are the main lens recommendations that you should be using. Beyond that, of course, you need a sturdy tripod for your longer exposures. If you have a star tracking mount, you're welcome to bring it with you. I'll just ask that you know how to use it, because I don't use one. And something else that I ask that you need to be able to do before you come is to know how to use your camera in manual exposure mode, and also know how to manual focus your camera. Now you're thinking, you said before it's too dark to use autofocus. What can I use to manually focus my camera in the dark? Well, let me show you. All right, so most lenses that will have that f2.8 or faster aperture that you're going to want to be using will also have this focusing scale here. And you can see on mine, it's set right at the infinity marker. Now, if you know where your lens focuses to infinity, which is very important for shooting the stars in the Milky Way, because obviously they're very, very, very far away, you want to be able to focus your lens to infinity. But I will say that not every lens is actually focused to infinity on the infinity mark like this one is. And even if it does, it's often a good idea to just double check your focus when you're out in the field to make sure everything is good. And you can actually do it without turning on your headlamp. When you're out with a group, that's kind of helpful. So let me show you how to do this. So let me make sure I've got my lens cap off here. And then we'll go back behind the camera. And what I'm going to do is put my camera into live view mode. I'll turn off my headlamp so it's not reflecting off of there. And what you can do is use the buttons on your camera to start zooming in. And you're starting to see, hopefully it's showing up on the video, some little points of light showing up in your picture. And what you can do is keep zooming in on those points of light. Sorry about that. And your display is probably going to look pretty grainy and noisy. But basically you're zooming in on some stars, the brightest stars that are out there. And I think that one's showing up on the video now. So get that nice and easy to see on your screen, and then you can start turning your manual focus ring. And what you want to do is make that point of light of the star as small as possible. So if you kind of shift it back and forth a little bit, you'll find that sweet spot. And what that will do is make sure that your lens is focused to infinity. Try that one more time just to show what I'm doing. And then I know that my lens is focused to infinity once I've got that star nice and small. And then I can go ahead and start shooting. Now, as I mentioned, it's often a good idea to recheck your focus through your shooting session, especially if you move your camera around from one location to another, or even if you're changing orientation from vertical to horizontal. There's always opportunities to bump that little focusing ring, even if it's pretty stiff, and nudge your focus off just a little bit, and then you'll ruin all your shots after that. So kind of every time you're recomposing and setting up a new shot, it's not a bad idea to just double check that focus really quick, make sure everything's locked in, and then go ahead and continue. So make sure you know how to manually focus your camera. And as I mentioned, use your camera in manual mode for manual exposure. To set your aperture and your shutter speed manually, know how to adjust your ISO, which should be pretty straightforward. And then you'll have everything you need to do night photography with me on one of my workshops. Having a wireless remote, if it's available, can be helpful, but a wired remote can often be necessary to do a longer foreground exposure if that's something that you want to do to blend your exposures after the fact. A lot of cameras, if you're using a wireless remote, will limit you to that 30-second max exposure. But with a remote that plugs in, you can go longer than that and kind of lock in your shutter open for 2, 3, 4 minutes to do your foreground blend if that's something you want to do. Other than that, that's all the special things you need to know about night photography. So I look forward to having you join me on one of my workshops up here in Rocky Mountain National Park. Thank you for watching.